The question I'm asking you in this video is very simple, and I'd like you to reflect on it sincerely. If you're watching this video alone, I'd like you to really ask yourself these questions. If you're watching it with your girlfriend, boyfriend, husband, or wife, I'd really like you to ask one of these questions and think it over. The most general, most basic question I'm asking is, why would we in the vegan movement expect to have better outcomes, better results than the anti-abortion movement if we are using the same tactics? Do you believe that in your lifetime, the vegan movement will have more money at its disposal than the anti-abortion movement? Do you believe that during your lifetime, veganism will have more adherents and more passionate adherents, more firebrand activists and advocates than the anti-abortion movement? Do you believe that during your lifetime, veganism will have more political representation and institutional support than the Catholic Church? The Catholic Church doesn't just run small foundations for legal advocacy on abortion and reproduction issues. The Catholic Church owns universities. The Catholic Church owns schools, school districts, school boards. The Catholic Church has hospitals. Churches too. Maybe you've heard of these things. It's really difficult to exaggerate the enormity of scale that we're talking about when you consider what the anti-abortion movement is in Western Europe, the United States, and Canada. And when you think about the enormous institutions that support it, the Catholic Church, various Protestant churches, so on and so forth, the cultural depth, as well as the resources, not just financial resources, and the passion of the advocates involved. And yet, within our lifetimes, the anti-abortion movement has failed. And I think we all feel pretty confident that it's going to continue to fail. The decrease in the rate of abortions per woman of age where she could have abortions, the decrease in the rate of abortions, sometimes you measure it relative to the number of live births, it is so mild that pretty much every analysis you read of why the statistic has changed in the way that it has struggles to attribute any of the change whatsoever to the anti-abortion movement. It's unbelievable millions and billions of dollars spent over these years, and the various forms of street activism, confrontational, how shall I put this mildly, invidious activism of anti-abortion activists themselves. It's much easier to link the declining rate of abortions per person to better access to condoms. Oh yeah, if you're talking about the 1970s compared to the 21st century, people have much easier access to condoms. This leads to fewer abortions. Easier access to the birth control pill. Huge change, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Easier access to information. Thanks to the internet, it's easier than it ever was to figure out how to properly use a condom, how to properly use a birth control pill, to look up medical advice for free instantly on every conceivable topic linked to reproduction, whatever method you want to use. There were many profound social changes, including changes in religious attitudes, changes in the status of the Catholic Church, changes in demographics. What percentage of people living in California were ethnically Chinese in the year 1970? What percentage are ethnically Chinese now? Chinese people have different attitudes towards abortion, different attitudes towards sexuality, childbirth, child raising. Okay? What percentage of people were Hispanic in the United States of America in 1970? What percentage are Hispanic today? These changes all have been of greater significance, greater importance to changing the rate of abortions in the United States of America than the street activism, than the tactics for advocacy, disruption, etc., that the anti-abortion movement has engaged in. Does anyone really believe that the vegan movement could be equally successful or even more successful if you're engaging in the same sorts of tactics, in the same sort of confrontational and disruptive civil disobedience that anti-abortion activists engage in. I think if you ask yourself these questions honestly, what you're going to discover is that you don't believe in civil disobedience. You don't. Maybe you want to. Maybe you want to believe that with the same pious faith as a religious fanatic who goes out holding a sign telling people that if they have an abortion, they'll go to hell. They go out and do this again and again. Someone who goes out and screams angrily at women who are on their way into an abortion clinic, telling them that what they're doing is murder. And you know what? There's a similar sort of fanaticism in people who develop the sort of genteel people skills to go out and try to advise and counsel women against having abortions. There are all kinds of foundations that take that approach instead. And of course, there were then all the advocacy groups that are working within the halls of power, shall we say, within the legal system, within the parliamentary system, so on and so forth. There's this enormous panoply of tools and resources at the disposal of the anti-abortion movement, and there's a huge percentage of the population backing it, many of them already organized into church groups, into institutions like Catholic schools, universities, hospitals, but yeah, the church themselves, meeting once a week, singing in harmony in a way that vegans will never meet, will never be organized, will never have common cultural ground, will never have common festivals, will never sing the same tune. If you reproduce the same tactics as the anti-abortion movement, you will fail. And I think that all it takes to prove it to yourself is just a moment of detached reflection on how counterproductive it really is to confront strangers on the street screaming that meat is murder.